On. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Metzler, one of the programmers here at SFND Fest Green Film Festival, San Francisco. As you can see, we're still kind of in the weird world of the pandemic, and with it, we're kind of doing a mixture of programming. But we've just had a chance to see this really wonderful, provocative, and beautiful film, Last of the Right Whales, and we're lucky enough to have the filmmaker Nadine Piquezana. Welcome, Nadine. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Chris. How are you?
Doing good. It was really exciting to kind of run across your film, just because I think the world of the ocean isn't always something that we quite understand, and I just I always wonder, with filmmakers that make films, like this, which is kind of a cross between a wildlife film and a science film and a just kind of environmental and just a great art film. What made you decide to kind of go down this rabbit hole and you knew there was a documentary to make?
Mhm. Well, in Canada in 2017, not just in Canada, I should say in North America, because it happened along the US coastline as well, there were a number of right whales that died, 17 in 1 year. And, it actually happened within the space of a few months. And that really caught everyone's attention. And it was in the press in both countries. And it wasn't immediately clear what was killing the whales, or at least it couldn't be announced because necropsies had to be performed. Scientists had to go in and do autopsies on the animals. And it was discovered they were being killed by ship strikes and fishing gear entanglement. And so knowing that these things are preventable really made me want to tell this story. And so I started looking for a way to do it so that audiences, so people could become attached to these animals, because that's really the struggle when you're talking about a critically endangered animal that most people have never seen. There's about 336 of these animals left in the world. And so, that was the challenge, was being able to get the images that you see in the film so that people could come to know and love this whale.
And what before you started making this film, I mean, was were you kind of familiar with kind of the issues that were kind of threatening right whales, or just even whales in general? Or
No, the first I'd heard of a North Atlantic right whale was in 2017 when these deaths were occurring. And I found in showing the film, we released it in October, actually September of last year. And at many of the screenings, the majority of people were in the same boat. They had never heard of this whale, much less were aware of the fact that we were unintentionally killing them and potentially leading to their extinction. Most right whales, they do not die of natural causes anymore. They're dying because of interactions with human activity in the ocean.
and so once you um, decided to make the film, what was how did you kind of decide who you were going to talk to? And then also, with film being such a kind of visual medium, how did you kind of decide kind of on the aesthetic and approach to kind of, kind of capture the story so that we could, you know, um, kind of impress upon, what's really going on?
Yeah, well, some of those things were decided for me because of the situation. So, with a critically endangered animal, with this whale, you can't approach within 500 yards in the United States, 200 meters in Canada. So, even to get close enough to try and get the images that we did that are in the film, you need federal permits. So, there's a whole application process that you have to go through. You have to be working with scientists who are, in very close proximity with the animals because of the research that they're doing. So that really led me to those people who've been on the forefront of this, some of them for decades. They've dedicated their entire lives to this. Other people who are just starting out. So we have a young photographer, Nick Hawkins, who's up in the Canadian waters in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, who is trying to get underwater images of the whales, because you can't dive with North Atlantic right whales, that's prohibited. So we were largely using aerial photography, but Nick had created this subsurface drone that he could remotely control from the boat to try and get underwater images. So that was one of the sort of quests that we were following with one of the individuals in the film. And then there's, a fisherman who's also trying ropeless gear. So all of the protagonists in the film are each in their own way relating to the whale because of, where they're coming to the situation from, what their background is, and their reason for being involved. But they're all trying to find solutions or ways of protecting the species so that it doesn't go extinct.
Yeah. Well, you did a really great job of kind of weaving together the story. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it before, but one of the obviously one of the challenges with any sort of endangered species, or even just depending on the area you live in the country or in the world, is that kind of out of sight, out of mind, in the sense of
Mhm.
if you don't know very much, if you're or you don't kind of interact with these animals, it's easy just to kind of not give them much consideration. But then, of course, we really rely on filmmakers to go out there and capture these stories. And then
Mm.
when you're out of the best interest, the animals also restricted. I can imagine that you have to get very creative in the way that you tell it. Um, was there any assumptions that you had when you first started making the film that kind of either changed, or surprises that you had um, during the making of it?
Yeah, initially I thought I could just film in the Gulf because that's where the majority of deaths were coming. One of the reasons that the North Atlantic right whale is coming into the Gulf of St. Lawrence is because they're looking for food. And so with climate change, the ocean currents have changed. So the distribution of the plankton that they feed on is also changing. So the whales are coming north looking for food, and we didn't have the protection measures in place that we know work. So things like vessel speed limits, how fast is a boat traveling in the water, and also fishing closures. So shutting down certain areas when we know the whales are present. And so these protections just weren't in place. And so I thought I would make the film in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. But then I realized that, these risk factors that we were talking about impact not only their lives, but also their ability to reproduce. And so it's really impacting their health. And so I really had to get down to the calving grounds, and that's in Florida, off the coast of Georgia, South Carolina. And so it's as I became more involved in the story and speaking to researchers, scientists, I realized that I had to go to all of the habitats to really understand what is happening with the species, and what we have to do in order to protect them.
Nice. And I know you've had a chance to kind of start to get the film out in different communities um, over the last year. Um, what are kind of some of the takeaways that you kind of hope we as audiences might kind of consider, of like, how can we take action?
Well, first and foremost, I hope that when people see the film, because we really spent so much time trying to get those images, but not just images of the whales, but to get to know them on an individual basis, because all of these whales have been tracked and studied by scientists for decades. And so they know their individual life histories, and not only that, but the histories of entire families over 3 generations. They can tell them each apart because they have a callosity pattern, roughened skin on their head. It's like a fingerprint.
Wow.
And so they really know them as individuals. And so we followed, snow cone and her calf are central to the story of our film over 2.5 years, from the birth of the calf to, unfortunate incidents with the calf being injured and the mother being entangled. And so what happens within that family is really an example of what's happening to the entire species. So I want the audience to connect with the whales as individuals, in the same way that the people in the film do. And through that, come to understand, that there's a reason to protect these whales, and it's possible to do that. So in addition to falling in love with them, I want them to see how each of the people in the film is working to protect them, whether it's this pop-up gear, so new gear being tested by fishermen that takes away the risk of entanglement or greatly reduces it, to people who are dealing with necropsies of young calves, like snow cones calf, 6 months old. In the course of filming, over the time that it took us to make this film, 3 calves were hit, and by small recreational boats. So not container ships, not cruise ships, but small boats. So each of us has a role to play in this, whether it's encouraging government to support fishermen who want to transition to the safer gear, or if we're out on the water, just keeping an eye out for whales and making sure that we're going slow enough to spot them when we're in habitats where they are.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think we often just kind of think of ourselves and not so much of our the surroundings and environment. Again, Nadine, thanks again for sharing the film with us. And I always kind of remind audiences of our festivals that we're kind of the grassroots street team. In the sense that filmmakers share their films with us in festivals, and the hope is that after you see it, you're going to go on, and if you like the film, go kind of share it and let people know that you've seen this film, and it's going to be coming to a community, to other communities around the country and the world. But also, what's a kind of a good way to kind of continue to follow your filmmaking efforts, and also just even help spread the word about the film?
Yeah, we've got a whole campaign that we're doing. So it's going to run for the entire year. If they go to the website, lastoftherightvhales.com, there's a take action page. You can hear about everything that we're doing. We're going to be doing screenings all up and down the East Coast, as well as on the West Coast. And we're doing a lot of panel discussions. We have an email campaign running. We're actually also inviting the audience. There's a whale, there's an entanglement that we filmed you see it in the final quarter of the film. It's quite a serious entanglement, but that whale has not yet been named. And so it will be named this year, or at least the consortium of scientists will be looking at naming whale 4615. And so we're inviting audiences to submit names. So if you go to the website, it'll tell you how you can do that. There's specific protocol and steps to putting forward a name. That's all explained on the website. So yeah, there's lots of ways to stay involved with the film and the issue.
So folks, just go to lastoftherightvhales.com and let them know you saw this really lovely film. And thank you again, Nadine.
Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it.